American Pickers debuted on the History Channel in January 2010 and quickly captured the hearts of viewers across the United States. The premise was simple. Two charismatic men, Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz, would travel the country, scouring forgotten barns, attics, and backyards in search of rare antiques and collectibles. The show was grounded in a shared love for history, hidden treasures, and the stories behind old, often forgotten objects. It wasn't just about finding things. It was about unearthing pieces of the past that had been left to age and weather, and that struck a chord with viewers. The show quickly became a ratings powerhouse, appealing to both history buffs and treasure hunters alike. Mike Wolfe, the more business-savvy and personable of the two, quickly became the face of the show, while Frank Fritz, with his more down-to-earth, quirky demeanor, played the perfect foil. Their chemistry on screen was undeniable. The fans loved watching the duo engage in lighthearted banter, with Frank's humor and eccentricities bringing a balance to Mike's more focused approach. Together, they made a formidable team, an antique hunting duo that seemed to operate like family, often bickering but always having each other's backs. But as the show continued to rise in popularity, tensions began to simmer just below the surface. While their on-screen relationship seemed solid, there were signs that things were beginning to fray behind the scenes. The increasing success of American Pickers started to change the dynamic between Mike and Frank. What had been a partnership grounded in friendship and mutual respect was slowly shifting into a more business-driven relationship. Fans were still enamored by the charm of the show, but those working on it began to notice the rift. Mike, whose love for the art of picking was matched only by his drive to expand his business ventures, began taking more control over the show's direction. As American Pickers grew into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, Mike's influence expanded as well, and he started exploring other opportunities, ventures that went beyond the TV show. Frank, who was more focused on the picking itself and enjoyed the thrill of discovery, started feeling sidelined. Despite being part of the show's success from the very beginning, Frank found himself becoming less and less involved in the decisions about the future of American Pickers. The growing divide between their personal and professional lives started to affect their on-screen interactions. While fans continued to tune in for the pickin', the cracks in their friendship were becoming more apparent. And as the show's success reached new heights, so did the pressure and expectations. The once fun and carefree spirit of the show began to feel more like a job, with both men trying to find their footing in a rapidly changing environment. This shift in their relationship was the beginning of a much deeper and more complex story, one that would eventually lead to Frank's departure from American Pickers and a dramatic turning point in both their careers. As American Pickers became more popular, the dynamics between Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz continued to evolve. What had once been a partnership rooted in shared passion and mutual respect for antique hunting now seemed to be shifting into something else entirely. The pressures of fame, along with Mike's growing desire to expand his business, began to create friction between the two stars. While Mike's ambitions led him to explore new business ventures, Frank remained more focused on the original purpose of the show, the love of picking and finding hidden treasures. The turning point came when Mike began to focus more on his personal brand. His growing celebrity status opened up new opportunities for him, including product lines, speaking engagements, and a deeper involvement in American Pickers production. Mike started spending more time on the business side of things, seeking ways to expand the show's reach and secure its longevity. Meanwhile, Frank, who had been a key part of the show from the beginning, wasn't as interested in the business side of things. He remained dedicated to the thrill of the hunt and the genuine passion for uncovering forgotten history in the form of antiques. This mismatch of priorities between the two began to cause tension. Frank, who had once been a vital part of Mike's life, felt increasingly sidelined. As Mike's professional ambitions soared, Frank's frustration grew. He was the more introverted of the two, often preferring to stay behind the scenes or engage with the objects themselves rather than the business dealings that Mike was so focused on. Frank's passion for picking was what had made him a fan favorite. But behind the scenes, it was clear that the magic between him and Mike wasn't what it used to be. Frank's desire to keep the show grounded in its roots, focused on finding rare antiques and telling their stories, was increasingly at odds with Mike's vision for the future. The divide became more apparent during filming. Frank would often express his frustrations with the direction of the show, while Mike remained focused on expanding the brand and increasing its profitability. The two men weren't just growing apart professionally, they were also drifting apart personally. In interviews, both Mike and Frank tried to downplay any issues between them, but the tension was palpable. Frank's commitment to the show seemed to wane, and his personal life became more complicated. He was increasingly unhappy with the way things were unfolding, and fans could sense the shift. The chemistry that had once made American Pickers so successful was starting to feel strained, and it was clear that something needed to change. As Mike's business empire expanded, Frank became more disillusioned with the direction the show was heading. He wasn't as interested in becoming a larger-than-life celebrity or capitalizing on his fame. He just wanted to keep picking, finding treasures, and sharing the stories behind them. The divide between their personal ambitions was becoming too great to ignore. The clash between Mike's aspirations and Frank's focus on the authenticity of the show would soon lead to a pivotal moment in American Pickers history. What once was a thriving partnership would soon face its biggest challenge, one that would ultimately change the course of both men's careers. As the tension between Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz continued to build, an even bigger challenge began to surface that would put Frank's future on American Pickers in jeopardy: his health. While the show's audience had always known Frank to be the more physically demanding of the two, constantly crawling through dusty barns and climbing into old vehicles in search of treasures, his body was starting to show the toll of years of hard work. Frank had always been open about his love for the physical nature of picking. However, the relentless strain on his back, knees, and joints from years of crawling and climbing began to catch up with him. Fans began to notice that Frank was moving more slowly, and there were even rumors that he might be struggling with his health more than he was letting on. At first, Frank tried to push through the pain and maintain the active, high-energy persona that fans adored. But it was becoming increasingly difficult to keep up with the physical demands of the show. Behind the scenes, Frank's health issues were becoming a major concern. In 2020, he took a brief hiatus from American Pickers, leaving fans wondering what had happened to him. It was during this time that it was revealed that Frank had been dealing with significant back problems, which had been worsened by his physical lifestyle. Doctors had advised him to slow down, but for Frank, stepping away from the show felt like a loss of identity. He wasn't just a picker, he was a central part of the show's heart and soul. Taking a break felt like stepping away from his passion. As Frank's health issues mounted, the show began to move forward without him, and the void he left was palpable. Mike continued to work, now often accompanied by other guest stars and team members, but the dynamic was no longer the same. For longtime fans, it was clear that Frank's absence had affected the chemistry that made the show so special. What had once been a duo that sparked off each other's energy now felt like it was missing a key element. Frank's return to the show in 2021 was met with excitement from fans, but it was clear that he wasn't the same. He was more reserved, and his health challenges were evident. His energy levels seemed diminished, and there was a noticeable difference in his approach to picking. The physical toll was obvious, and many began to wonder whether Frank's time on the show might be coming to an end. He struggled with his back and health even more, forcing him to reconsider his place on the show and his future in the industry. In interviews, Frank expressed his frustration with the fact that his health had become such a significant barrier in his ability to do what he loved. He was no longer able to go on the intense hunts he once did. This struggle, coupled with the ongoing tension with Mike, made it unclear whether Frank would be able to continue his career in the same way he had before. Despite the struggles, Frank remained resilient and refused to let his health issues define him. His fans remained loyal, and his passion for picking never truly faded. However, it became increasingly evident that Frank's time on American Pickers was limited, and the direction of the show would inevitably change. Fans had to come to terms with the fact that, as time passed, the show could no longer remain the same without Frank in full force. As Frank's health struggles became more apparent, another critical factor began to affect his relationship with Mike Wolfe, their personal dynamic. For years, fans had adored the unique friendship and chemistry between the two, but behind the scenes, cracks were beginning to show. There were whispers of tension, disagreements, and eventual fallout that would change American Pickers forever. From the very beginning of American Pickers, Mike and Frank had built their careers on the idea that they were partners, a team with a shared love for hunting down rare antiques and forgotten treasures. But over time, their relationship began to fray. The tension had been building for years, with subtle signs of friction during filming. They were no longer the inseparable duo fans had come to know and love. The cause of this shift was never explicitly clear to the public, but many insiders point to a variety of factors: Frank's growing health issues, his time away from the show, and Mike's evolving role as the lead. As Mike continued to grow as a star and executive producer, his vision for the show seemed to diverge from Frank's. What started as a partnership of equals now felt more like a hierarchy, with Mike taking on more responsibility and the show's direction shifting to focus on his character. Fans noticed that Frank was being pushed to the sidelines more and more, and his presence on the show began to wane. He was still a core part of American Pickers, but his role was becoming less prominent as Mike took center stage. In 2020, Frank's absence from American Pickers led to rumors about a falling out between the two. While the official story was that Frank was taking time off due to health concerns, the fact that Mike continued to film with other co-stars raised questions. The speculation only intensified when Frank later confirmed that his relationship with Mike was strained. In interviews, Frank admitted that there had been tension between them, and that they were no longer as close as they once were. The rift was particularly difficult for Frank because, in many ways, Mike had been like a brother to him. Their bond had been central to American Pickers, and for Frank to openly acknowledge the distance between them was heartbreaking for longtime fans of the show. Frank even revealed that the tension had been building for a while, with the two disagreeing on how the show should evolve and what direction it should take. Frank's absence from filming, combined with Mike's increasing control over the show, made it clear that their partnership was no longer what it had once been. The final break came in 2021 when Frank made the decision to officially step away from the show. His health was still a concern, but it was clear that the growing divide between him and Mike played a significant role in his departure. In a public statement, Frank expressed his gratitude for the opportunities American Pickers had given him but acknowledged that his time on the show was over. Fans were devastated, as they had been hoping for a reunion between the two, but it was evident that Frank and Mike had reached an irreparable point. For many, the end of Frank's time on American Pickers marked the end of an era. The show would continue with Mike at the helm, but the magic that had once defined it was undeniably gone. Frank's exit raised questions about the future of the show and whether it could continue to captivate audiences without its beloved co-host. Despite the fallout, Frank expressed no ill will toward Mike, but he acknowledged that their professional paths had diverged. For Frank, the journey of American Pickers had come to a close, and while the chapter was difficult to turn, he was ready to move forward, focusing on his health, family, and future endeavors. As American Pickers continued to capture the hearts of millions, Frank Fritz's health began to decline in ways that were not immediately visible to fans. Although his absence from the show raised eyebrows, many did not fully understand the extent of his struggles. Behind the camera, Frank was quietly dealing with a series of serious health issues, some of which had been developing for years. In 2020, Frank's absence from American Pickers was officially attributed to health concerns. However, what the public didn't know was that Frank had been battling significant physical ailments that would ultimately change his life. His struggles with back pain, as well as other ongoing health issues, had become increasingly difficult to manage. Frank had always been a larger-than-life personality, known for his boundless energy and love for the thrill of treasure hunting. But the reality of his declining health was now taking a toll on both his personal life and his role on the show. Frank's back problems were not just an inconvenience, they were debilitating. For someone who spent much of his life on the road, digging through piles of antiques and hauling heavy objects, it was no surprise that his body was beginning to show the wear and tear. In interviews, Frank admitted that his back pain had become so severe that it was affecting his ability to do the very thing he loved, pick. The physical strain of bending, lifting, and sifting through decades-old relics had finally caught up with him. Despite the pain, Frank pushed through for as long as he could, but it was clear that something had to give. As Frank's health issues worsened, the decision was made for him to step back from American Pickers for an extended period of time. During this time, many fans wondered whether they would ever see him return to the show in the same capacity. For Frank, the decision was not an easy one. He was forced to confront the reality that his physical limitations were no longer something he could ignore. His absence from the show wasn't just about taking a break, it was about taking care of himself, focusing on his health, and recovering from years of physical strain. Frank's health struggles were made even more challenging by his mental and emotional state. Being away from the show that had defined his career was difficult, but knowing that his body wasn't able to perform at the level it once had was devastating. Frank had always prided himself on his work ethic and his ability to push through adversity, but now he was facing a reality where he had to listen to his body and take care of himself. This shift in mindset was not easy for someone who had built his entire career around hard work and physical endurance. While Frank took time away to recover, the public was left to speculate about his return. Fans of the show missed his quirky sense of humor, his passion for picking, and his dynamic with Mike. They hoped for a quick return, but it became increasingly clear that Frank's health needed to take priority. Over time, it became evident that Frank's health would remain a major factor in his future on American Pickers. Despite his struggles, Frank was determined to return to the show once he had recovered. But as time went on, it became clear that his health challenges were more complicated than originally thought. The ongoing back issues, combined with other health concerns, made his return uncertain. Fans were left wondering whether the show could continue without him, and if Frank would ever be able to rejoin Mike and the rest of the team. Behind the scenes, Frank continued to fight his health battles, but it was clear that his time on American Pickers had changed forever. His physical limitations had forced him to take a step back, and it was unclear what the future would hold for him in the world of picking. As American Pickers continued to air and Fritz's absence lingered, whispers of tension behind the scenes began to surface. Fans who were once charmed by the dynamic between Frank and his co-host Mike Wolfe began to speculate about what was really happening between the two. While the show portrayed them as best friends and partners in picking, it wasn't long before rumors emerged that there were underlying issues between Frank and Mike that could have affected their professional relationship. In an interview that shocked many, Frank revealed that his departure from the show wasn't solely due to health reasons. There had been an ongoing rift between him and Mike that had been simmering for some time. Although Frank had always been open about their strong bond on screen, off-screen things weren't as smooth as they seemed. Frank admitted that he and Mike had grown apart over the years, citing personal differences and frustrations that had built up during their long partnership. One of the key points of tension stemmed from creative differences regarding the direction of American Pickers. While Frank was passionate about the show's original concept, truly discovering hidden treasures and honoring the history behind the items they were picking, Mike's vision seemed to lean more toward making the show more commercial. Frank felt that the authentic spirit of the show was being compromised for the sake of ratings and financial gain. This difference in approach created a divide between the two that became increasingly hard to ignore. Frank also revealed that his relationship with Mike had become strained due to personal issues. Both men had different expectations of how they should be treated on set, and Frank felt that Mike had taken on more of a leadership role, while Frank's role was being sidelined. Frank's departure wasn't just a result of physical pain. It was a culmination of years of feeling unappreciated and undervalued in the partnership. As Mike took on more responsibilities and became more visible in the media, Frank began to feel like he was being pushed into the background. The tension between the two grew more evident when Mike spoke out in the press about Frank's absence. While Mike initially expressed concern for Frank's health, his comments also seemed to suggest that Frank's departure had something to do with his inability to keep up with the demands of the show. Mike's words seemed to place blame on Frank for not being able to meet the expectations of the job, which caused further strain in their already fragile relationship. In contrast, Frank felt hurt by Mike's public statements, interpreting them as a lack of understanding and support. He believed that Mike wasn't fully acknowledging the extent of his health problems, and was instead focusing on the logistics of the show and how it was affected by his absence. This sense of betrayal from someone he had considered a close friend made Frank even more disillusioned with the entire situation. By the time Frank's health forced him to take an extended break from American Pickers, it was clear that the friendship between him and Mike had been deeply impacted. While the two had built a successful career together, their personal and professional relationship was no longer as strong as it once had been. The tension between them seemed to cloud their future in the world of antiques and picking, and it left many fans questioning whether the duo could ever rebuild their bond. Despite these challenges, both Frank and Mike continued to pursue their own projects. Mike remained with American Pickers, continuing to host the show with a new co-host, while Frank took time to focus on his health and personal life. But the unresolved tension between the two men continued to linger, and it remained unclear whether they would ever be able to reconcile their differences and return to the picking world as the dynamic duo they once were. As American Pickers continued to air and Fritz's absence lingered, whispers of tension behind the scenes began to surface. Fans who were once charmed by the dynamic between Frank and his co-host Mike Wolfe began to speculate about what was really happening between the two. While the show portrayed them as best friends and partners in picking, it wasn't long before rumors emerged that there were underlying issues between Frank and Mike that could have affected their professional relationship. In an interview that shocked many, Frank revealed that his departure from the show wasn't solely due to health reasons. There had been an ongoing rift between him and Mike that had been simmering for some time. Although Frank had always been open about their strong bond on screen, off-screen things weren't as smooth as they seemed. Frank admitted that he and Mike had grown apart over the years, citing personal differences and frustrations that had built up during their long partnership. One of the key points of tension stemmed from creative differences regarding the direction of American Pickers. While Frank was passionate about the show's original concept, truly discovering hidden treasures and honoring the history behind the items they were picking, Mike's vision seemed to lean more toward making the show more commercial. Frank felt that the authentic spirit of the show was being compromised for the sake of ratings and financial gain. This difference in approach created a divide between the two that became increasingly hard to ignore. Frank also revealed that his relationship with Mike had become strained due to personal issues. Both men had different expectations of how they should be treated on set, and Frank felt that Mike had taken on more of a leadership role, while Frank's role was being sidelined. Frank's departure wasn't just a result of physical pain. It was a culmination of years of feeling unappreciated and undervalued in the partnership. As Mike took on more responsibilities and became more visible in the media, Frank began to feel like he was being pushed into the background. The tension between the two grew more evident when Mike spoke out in the press about Frank's absence. While Mike initially expressed concern for Frank's health, his comments also seemed to suggest that Frank's departure had something to do with his inability to keep up with the demands of the show. Mike's words seemed to place blame on Frank for not being able to meet the expectations of the job, which caused further strain in their already fragile relationship. In contrast, Frank felt hurt by Mike's public statements, interpreting them as a lack of understanding and support. He believed that Mike wasn't fully acknowledging the extent of his health problems, and was instead focusing on the logistics of the show and how it was affected by his absence. This sense of betrayal from someone he had considered a close friend made Frank even more disillusioned with the entire situation. By the time Frank's health forced him to take an extended break from American Pickers, it was clear that the friendship between him and Mike had been deeply impacted. While the two had built a successful career together, their personal and professional relationship was no longer as strong as it once had been. The tension between them seemed to cloud their future in the world of antiques and picking, and it left many fans questioning whether the duo could ever rebuild their bond. Despite these challenges, both Frank and Mike continued to pursue their own projects. Mike remained with American Pickers, continuing to host the show with a new co-host, while Frank took time to focus on his health and personal life. But the unresolved tension between the two men continued to linger. It remained unclear whether they would ever be able to reconcile their differences and return to the picking world as the dynamic duo they once were. After taking time off from American Pickers to focus on his health, Frank Fritz's return to the public eye was something fans had been eagerly waiting for. His absence from the show had left a noticeable gap, and many wondered what Frank's future would look like. Would he return to the world of picking? Or would his health challenges keep him from ever getting back on television? During his time away, Frank made significant strides in his recovery. While Crohn's disease is a chronic condition with no cure, Frank found ways to manage his symptoms, which included adopting a healthier lifestyle and making adjustments to his diet and physical routine. With the support of his doctors, Frank was able to gain more control over his health, though the road was long and difficult. Throughout this period, Frank also became more involved in the social media world, where he used his platform to keep in touch with his fans and update them on his health progress. This allowed his followers to see a more personal side of him, as he shared both his struggles and triumphs along the way. Frank's fans, who had seen him at his lowest point, were incredibly supportive, sending messages of encouragement and offering their love as he worked on healing. Frank's story of resilience inspired many, especially those who were dealing with their own chronic conditions. He became a symbol of perseverance, showing that despite the challenges life throws at you, it's possible to find strength and hope. His transparency about his health struggles and his decision to prioritize self-care resonated with many of his fans, who admired his honesty and courage. But as Frank continued to work on his recovery, the question remained, would he ever return to American Pickers? Fans were hopeful that Frank would rejoin Mike Wolfe and the rest of the crew, but there were still many hurdles to overcome. The physical demands of picking and traveling were a significant concern, and Frank needed to be sure that he was physically able to handle it without putting his health at risk. In 2021, Frank made an appearance at a fan convention, where he briefly spoke about his recovery and his future plans. This was his first public appearance in quite some time, and fans were thrilled to see him out and about. While he didn't make any concrete announcements about his return to American Pickers, Frank's appearance marked a positive step forward in his journey. It was clear that Frank had not given up on his passion for picking, but he was taking a cautious approach to ensure that any future decisions were made with his health in mind. Frank also started to explore other projects, including potential collaborations with other influencers and creators. He began to consider branching out from American Pickers and finding new ways to engage with his audience. Fans were excited by the prospect of seeing more of Frank, whether it was through YouTube, social media, or even new television projects. Though his return to American Pickers was not immediately on the horizon, Frank's fans continued to cheer him on, hopeful that he would find a way to balance his love for picking with his newfound focus on self-care. It was clear that Frank's health was still his top priority, but the love and support from his fans provided him with the motivation to continue working toward a full recovery. As Frank's health improved, the possibility of returning to the world of picking and reuniting with his old partner Mike Wolfe became more and more likely. Fans eagerly awaited the day when Frank would be back on their screens, ready to dive into new adventures and discoveries, and share his passion for picking once again. Frank Fritz's absence from American Pickers was felt deeply by fans, as his dynamic with Mike Wolfe was one of the most beloved aspects of the show. Their chemistry, camaraderie, and shared passion for history and treasure hunting brought something special to the screen. Frank's laid-back demeanor, combined with his knowledge of obscure artifacts and history, made him a fan favorite. So when he stepped away from the show, viewers not only missed his presence but also questioned what would happen to the future of the series. The foundation that Frank helped build with Mike Wolfe was integral to the success of American Pickers. Frank was not just the funny and sometimes gruff sidekick, he was a crucial part of the picking duo. His expertise, eye for rare items, and enthusiasm for finding hidden gems was part of the magic that captivated audiences. His passion for unearthing treasures from America's forgotten corners brought a sense of adventure and authenticity to the show. Without Frank, many fans felt the series lacked the same spark. Frank's ability to connect with people from all walks of life also gave the show a unique depth. His natural ability to form bonds with collectors, sellers, and viewers alike made him an invaluable part of the team. Many of his interactions were heartwarming and humorous, creating an atmosphere of warmth and authenticity. Frank wasn't just picking for profit, he was picking because he loved the stories behind each object. It was this sense of curiosity and respect for the history of the items he found that made him so relatable to viewers. In Frank's absence, Mike Wolfe continued the show with a new partner, Robbie Wolfe, Mike's brother. While Robbie brought a different energy to the show, fans couldn't help but notice the difference in dynamic without Frank. The chemistry between Mike and Frank had been organic and deeply intertwined, so it was a tough adjustment for many viewers who had grown fond of their on-screen partnership. The question lingered, could the show continue to thrive without Frank? Could the magic of American Pickers be recaptured without the balance Frank brought to the table? These were difficult questions to answer, especially given Frank's long-standing influence on the show. It was clear that Frank's departure had shifted the tone of the show, but his legacy was still deeply embedded in American Pickers. In fact, Frank's legacy within the American Pickers universe is still alive and well. Despite his time away, Frank remains a key part of the show's history. His personality, his knowledge, and his signature approach to picking have left an indelible mark. Many fans continue to watch reruns, hoping to catch a glimpse of the old Frank, reminiscing about the classic moments that made American Pickers such a hit. The impact of Frank Fritz on American Pickers is undeniable. Even though his time on the show may have come to an end, his influence on the series and the genre of treasure hunting television as a whole remains significant. His legacy is one of adventure, authenticity, and a deep love for history. As American Pickers continues, it's clear that Frank's absence has left a void, but it's also a testament to the lasting impact he had on the show and its fans. The treasure hunts may go on, but for many, the show will always be incomplete without Frank's unique charm and expertise. As we look back on Frank Fritz's time on American Pickers, it's impossible to ignore the lasting impact he had on the show and the treasure hunting genre as a whole. Frank wasn't just a co-host, he was an integral part of the show's success and appeal. His passion for history, knack for finding rare and valuable items, and his authentic, down-to-earth personality made him a beloved figure in the world of reality TV. Frank's departure left a noticeable gap in the dynamic of the show, and fans continue to hold on to the memories of the moments he shared with Mike Wolfe as they crisscrossed America searching for forgotten treasures. In the years since Frank's departure, there have been rumors, speculations, and even hopes that one day Frank might return to the show. While these hopes have remained unfulfilled, the influence Frank left on American Pickers remains strong. The show still thrives on its legacy, with new episodes continuing to air, though many fans feel that the magic of the early seasons is forever linked to Frank's presence. However, Frank's journey goes beyond just his role on American Pickers. After leaving the show, Frank's personal life became the subject of public scrutiny, but he also spent time reflecting on his past and considering what's next for him. He's expressed interest in continuing his work in collecting and restoring antique items, suggesting that, while he may no longer be on TV, his passion for treasure hunting will continue to be a big part of his life. Frank's relationship with Mike Wolfe, though strained in the final years of his tenure on the show, remains an important part of his story. Their partnership was something special, and it's clear that Mike still values the time they spent together. In interviews and through social media, Mike has expressed his gratitude for the many years they spent working side by side, and fans continue to appreciate the bond they shared. While Mike has moved forward with his new partner, Robbie Wolfe, Frank's absence has left an undeniable void in the heart of American pickers. As for the future, American Pickers continues to evolve. While Frank's departure marked the end of an era, the show has remained a staple of reality TV for many. New treasure hunts, new finds, and new faces have taken the spotlight, but the show's core concept, uncovering hidden gems of history and culture, remains the same. Fans still tune in to see the excitement of discovering rare antiques and uncovering the stories behind them, and the spirit of adventure that Frank helped foster lives on. Frank Fritz's legacy on American Pickers is one of exploration, passion, and the pursuit of forgotten stories. He helped bring a sense of authenticity and heart to the show that resonated deeply with viewers. While the show may have moved forward without him, his contributions to American Pickers will always be remembered. In the end, Frank's story is a testament to the power of television to create lasting connections with fans. Through his time on American Pickers, Frank became a part of the cultural fabric, leaving an impact that won't soon be forgotten. Whether or not Frank ever returns to TV, his legacy as a treasure hunter and a beloved figure in the world of reality TV is secure, and his fans continue to cherish the memories of the adventures he shared with Mike Wolfe. Frank Fritz may have stepped away from the spotlight, but the treasures he uncovered and the stories he told will forever be a part of the American Pickers legacy.